Friends, you'll need to click there on your screen. It is just such a profound and tremendous honor to have Rabbi Riemer with us today to share his learning on Psalms. I have been a fan of Rabbi Riemer since before he ever knew I existed. When I was still in rabbinical school, I was reading his sermons. He is an extraordinary, prolific, incredible thought leader. And for us rabbis, he is the rock star of rabbis. So I just want to say you are all in for such a tremendous treat. We're going to share his bio in the chat. And to Rabbi Riemer, I want to say thank you so much for sharing your Torah with me and with us this morning. Take it away.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Robinson, for that generous introduction. I hope you believe it. I hope I don't believe it, or I'll be unfit to live with. And thank you for the privilege of teaching your class today. I want to say two things before I begin. The first is that I really feel that I know your rabbis very well, even though I've never actually met them in person. And the second is that I feel that I know most of you very well, even though I've never actually met you in person. How do I know your rabbis? I know them because now that Zoom has been invented, I've got my choice. I can go to any synagogue that I want to anywhere in the country. And I almost always choose to go to your synagogue. I go every week, except when you have a guest speaker. And why do I do this? I do this, and I say this in all honesty, because I consider your rabbis to be the very best preachers that I know anywhere, bar none. I go to your synagogue as I am constantly impressed by their talent and their wisdom and their content. I won't say any more for fear of embarrassing them, but I mean it. I think that both your rabbis are really tremendously talented. And since I hear them speak almost every week, I feel as if I know them by now. And the second thing I want to say before I begin is that I feel that I know most of you as well. Why? Because every Shabbos between 8:30 and 9:20, your rabbis have a program that takes place in one of the classrooms in which they study a topic together. And many of you attend those sessions. And so I know you by now. The only problem I have is that the camera is so arranged that the focus is on the rabbis, and I can only see the back of your heads. And so if you have a question when this session is over, or if you want to say something, will you please turn around and show me the back of your head? And then I will know who you are. Okay? Let's begin. Those who know me know that I love stories. Somebody once said that a Jack Riemer sermon is a story illustrated by 3 stories. So I'm going to tell you 3 stories this morning. The first story is shocking and unbelievable and upsetting. The second and the third story are inspiring. And I can vouch for all 3 stories. I was there. Let me begin with the first story. Do any of you watch Jeopardy? Jeopardy is the people who watch Jeopardy who get on that program are usually pretty smart people. And if anybody gets invited back a second time, they're really smart people. And yet I was watching Jeopardy one day last year, and something happened that shocked me and shocked everybody else, I think, who was watching the program. The master of the ceremonies gave people a choice of topics, and one of them chose walking, subject of walking in literature. And it carried double points if you got the answer. And the question was, which book in the Bible contains the phrase, "Yea, though I walk through the valley"? I thought that was a giveaway question. Surely everybody knows that's part of the 23rd Psalm. Surely, if you've ever been to a Jewish funeral or a Christian funeral, you've heard that song. Surely, if you've ever seen a family walk a loved one down to an operation, you've heard them say that song. Surely, if you've ever gone to the movies, you've heard that song. Surely, if you've ever read the King James Bible, it's one of the great treasures of Western literature, you've heard that 23rd Psalm. And so I feel, what are they asking such an obvious question for? And then, much to my shock, the woman who was asked that question stared into space and bit her lip and didn't know the answer. And the master of ceremonies turned to the other two people, and they stared into space, and they bit their tongues until the buzzer went off. Not one of the three of them knew yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for you are with me. Isn't that incredible? It's evidently possible to be an educated person in 21st century America and not know the most famous line in the most famous psalm, in the most famous translation in the Western literature. I wondered, what would John Adams have thought if he were alive and watching that program? John Adams kept a record of the debates and the sessions of the Continental Congress. And he wrote reports back to his wife. And that's how we have a record of what went on inside those sessions. And one night he wrote her and said, everybody's fighting and everybody's arguing and nobody can agree on anything. And one man, he never mentioned his name, I wish he had, said, can I please recite a page from the Psalms in order to calm us down? And Thomas Jefferson said, no, we believe in freedom of speech, in separation of religion and state. I don't want to hear no Psalms. But Ben Franklin, who was respected by everybody, said, what harm can it do? Let him read it. And the man read a psalm, and everybody calmed down. Imagine, here's a poem, here's a psalm, written 2,500 years ago, written 6,000 miles away in the land of Israel, written originally in Hebrew, which none of the people in the Continental Congress knew. And yet this psalm had the power to calm everybody down. Second example, it probably happened in your shul, it happened in my shul, probably happened in every shul in the world this year on Simchas Torah. I came to shul on Shmini Atzeres late. I hadn't heard the news, I hadn't looked at the paper for some reason. And I found out about the massacre that took place on Simchat Torah in the land of Israel. And when I came back to shul that night, nobody knew what to do. Should we celebrate Simchas Torah as if nothing had happened? How can you do that? Should we cancel Simchas Torah? How can you do that? And they arrived at a compromise at the shul that I went to, and probably at yours and every other shul. They had the hakafot, they went around with the Torah, and then instead of dancing, which is what we usually do in Simchas Torah, they brought the Torahs into a circle in the middle of the room, and people formed one circle and then another circle around them, and they sang songs. plaintive, wistful, yearning songs in a very quiet, gentle way. And these songs were all about the connection we feel to the land of Israel and the hope that God will bring peace there. And after I heard, the first song was Es Einai El Harim, I will lift up my eyes to heaven and I will sing to the God who guards the land of Israel. And this that comes from the Psalm 122. And the next one was what is it? I will pray for the safety of my brothers and sisters, which comes from the Psalms. And after a while, I caught on. Every single song they sang came from the book of Psalms. And I understood why. If you want to express longing, yearning, no place better than the book of Psalms. If you want to express wonder at the glory of creation, you'll find no better way than in some of the Psalms. If you want to find anger, express anger at God, you'll find no more appropriate place than in the book of, whatever you want to say, whatever you feel, you can find in the book of Psalms. So that's the second experience. Third experience began in a Soviet prison and ended in a cafeteria in Jerusalem. Natan Sharansky is one of the great heroes of our time. He was in love with a woman named Avital. They both applied to go to the land of Israel. To show you what Soviet bureaucracy was or is, they got two opposite answers. She got a notification she could leave for Israel, provided she left in 24 hours, and she could hardly take anything with her. He got a notice that since he applied for a visa to go to the land of Israel, he was obviously a traitor to the Soviet Union, and he had to report to prison within 24 hours. And if he didn't report, his jail sentence would be quadrupled. They had one night to be together before they were separated. She to Israel, he to prison. They decided to get married. It's not such an easy thing to do in Israel, in Russia. Where are you going to find a rabbi who'll marry them when the rabbis all work for the government? So they ran to a phone booth and they looked up rabbi and they looked up synagogue and they tore those pages out of the phone book and they jumped into a cab and they went from place to place to place till they finally found a rabbi who had the courage to marry them. And the next morning they had to say goodbye to each other. And she gave him a wedding present. She gave him a book of Psalms in Hebrew and in Russian. And he took it and put it in his pocket. And with that, he went into prison. And when he got there, he did three things. Number one, he was a great chess expert. Any of you play chess? So you know what he did? He had no board. He had no chessboard. He had no chess pieces. But he played chess against himself, which means he memorized the board and he memorized the location of every piece of chess. That's not easy to do. The second thing he did was every time the guards came by to give him food or check on him, he would tell anti-Soviet jokes. Why? Because he knew that not only was he on camera, they were on camera. And if they were caught laughing at an anti-Soviet joke, they would be in big trouble. And the third thing he did was study the book of Psalms. He didn't know much, but he studied it first in Hebrew, first in Russian, and then in Hebrew. And he says that book of Psalms kept him going and kept him sane and kept him inwardly feeling free in the Russian prison. When he wrote his autobiography, he called it I Shall Not Fear, a quote from the 23rd Psalm. I guess he assumed every American would know where where that comes from. And one day they let him out and they flew him to Berlin. And they were going to trade him for a Russian spy that America held. And they said, walk straight across the bridge. And he said, yeah, sure. And he walked zigzag to show that he was a free man. And when he got to the other side, there was Avital. And they hugged and they embraced. And then they put him on a plane and they flew him to Israel. When he got off the plane, they put him in a car and drove him to Jerusalem, and they drove him to the wall. And people all along the highway lined up to cheer and wave him on as he went. And when he got to the wall, they carried him on their shoulders and brought him to the wall. And he pulled out his psalm book, and he recited psalms at the wall. The footnote to the story is I have a cousin in Israel, and she was in a cafeteria one day. And Israel is a country where everybody stands in line at the cafeteria, whether you're a big shot or ambassador or general, everybody stands in line. And she turned around and there was Natan Sharansky. And she said, it's an honor to meet you. And she said, would you please tell me something? Is that story about you and the carrying the book of Psalms everywhere, is that really a true story or not? That's what the question to ask. He reached into his pocket and he pulled out the Psalms and he showed it to her. And he said to her a wonderful line. He says, you don't understand. I didn't carry this psalm. This psalm carried me. And I tell you that story because it's an example of how the Jewish people, past and present, have been carried by the book of Psalms and by its wisdom. And that's why I sat down and gave in to my friend Eli Spitz, who insisted in California, who insisted. We wrote a joint book. He wrote a scholarly essay about what the psalm originally meant. Each psalm originally, we chose 10 or 12 psalms that we liked. And he wrote an essay on what they originally meant. And I wrote an essay telling stories about what has been read into or out of them down through the years. I'll tell you just one more story, and then I'll study some psalms with you if you want. I have a friend, I don't know if I can tell you his name, who went through a terribly tough period. His wife divorced him. The court gave her custody of the children. He was only able to see them for a couple of hours every other weekend. His congregation let him go because they couldn't believe if he can't control his own house, how's he going to give us advice on how to control our lives? And he felt he was at the bottom of his life. And he got onto a subway and he's holding onto the pole, and somebody reached into his pocket and stole his money and stole his passport. And he felt, what else can go wrong? The next morning he got up to daven and he said, this is put up or shut up time. All my life I've been telling other people they should daven with seriousness and with spirit. Now it's my turn. Does davening make a difference or not? I'm going to daven like I never davened before. And I'm going to see, does it help or not? And he started davening and he got to Psalm 30. And when he got to that psalm, it spoke to him. And so he stopped his davening for a minute. He took a pen and he underlined 4 words in that psalm. Something, I think it was about, you turned my weeping into joy. I don't remember for sure what was the line. And every time after that, when he got to that psalm and he looked at those 4 words, they kept him going. By the way, he's now remarried, happily remarried, on good terms with his children. and has a good congregation. Things turned out. But one day he was riding in the car with a friend of his, and he told his friend that story. And the friend said to him, funny you should say that. Same thing happened to me. I was in the dumps. I felt depressed. I read a psalm. It spoke to me. I underlined it. And my friend said, really? What was the line? Believe it or not, it was the same line. And he pulled over the car and he showed his friend. They reached into a knapsack and he pulled out his siddur and he showed them. They both underlined the same psalm. And I tell you that story because it illustrates how words written 2,000 years ago still have the power to speak to us today. And now let me begin by telling you a story from the book. There's a guy named Paul Heilman, I think it is, young man who was called up, who's now in Gaza. He has a wife and 2 kids. You can't call from Gaza because there's security reasons. You don't want the enemy to know where you are. You don't want the enemy to overhear your conversation. You might give away information. So he would send her an email telling her what's going on in Gaza. And these letters that he sent were so impressive that they kept her going. And she showed them to people at a place called the Sapir Company or Sapir Institute, which deals with Jewish education for the diaspora. And they were so moved that they've translated these letters into English, and they're now available on the Sapir website. And they're gorgeous, gorgeous letters. And I'll just tell you one. He says to his wife, when you're in Gaza, you daven. You may be religious, not religious. When in Gaza, you daven. And so they would gather every Friday night inside a tent and daven together. And so many people wanted to daven that they would overflow the tent. And some people would have to daven outside. And then every so often, then an air raid signal would go off. And you got 15 seconds to get out, get to a safe place. And everybody got out of that tent as fast as they could. And everybody ran as fast as they could. And they ran to the miklat, to the underground shelter where they would be safe from the rockets. And they stayed there until the all clear signal went off. And then they came back. And when they came back, the chazan or the Baal Tefillah, the soldier who was leading the service, would pick up right where he left off. And Yossi Harman says that he was in the tent and he happened to look at the line with which the soldier had left off. And it was a line that he never liked to say. It says in the psalm that we say on Friday night, Ohavei Adonai sin ura. Those that really love God hate evil. And he always felt squeamish about saying that line. Aren't we supposed to be a people of love? Aren't we supposed to care about everybody? How come it says those that really love God hate evil? But that night he understood it for the first time in his life. On that night he understood what Kohelet says. Kohelet says there's a time to love and a time to hate. There's a time to hate. When you're faced with evil incarnate, when you're faced with pure evil, when you're faced with a barbaric people that stabs old men in their beds over and over and over again, when you're faced with a people that rapes old women and young girls, when you're faced with a cruel, savage people that stabs babies and cuts off their heads and throws them on the floor. When you're faced with that kind of a people, you can't reason with them, you can't debate with them, you can't compromise with them. When you're faced with pure evil, you got to fight them. You got to fight them with all your strength. And if you don't, they'll wipe you out. And that's what it means when it says in the Psalms, Ohavei Hashem Sinura. Those who really love God hate evil. That's an example of how a psalm written 2,000 years ago all of a sudden makes sense in a new way because of where we are today. I could tell you lots more, but I'll leave some time first for you to ask questions or express opinions if you want to. And if not, I'll tell you some more. Anybody have anything they want to say?
Any questions, any thoughts?
Anybody?
How about I'll get the ball rolling?
Okay.
Rabbi, is there a particular psalm that speaks to you deeply right now? I mean, you shared, this is extraordinary. You are 94 years old. Your
Going on
birthday,
95.
your
Going on
birthday
95. Yeah, right.
in March 95, right? Soon
Mm-hmm.
to be 95. And you are here at this moment where you perhaps may be looking at life with a little bit of wisdom. Is there a psalm that particularly speaks to you?
That's a very, very good question, and I'll try to answer it. I love Psalm 15. How can you not love it? It's such a simple sermon, and it tells such a basic truth. It tells such a basic truth that we never think about it, and we never realize how true it is. Psalm 15, it's called, it deals with a question that you and I deal with all the time. What is real religion? What is religion? Does God love the one who davens the most? Does God love the one who davens the loudest? Or does God care about what you do after you leave the shul? And does God care about how you live outside the shul? That's a real question, isn't it? And the psalmist gives the simplest, most basic answer to this question. He begins with a question. A lot of the psalms begin that way. Adonai, mi yagur ba'alecha, mi yishkon b'harkodshecha. God, who is fit to be in your tabernacle? Who is worthy of entering your sanctuary? Who do you like? Who do you care about? Who do you respect? That's the question. I don't know for sure. It's possible that the guards or the Kohanim or the Levites asked this question of everybody who wanted to enter the sanctuary. Before you come in here, think about why you're here. Think about who you are. Think about how you live. Think about, are you fit to enter this place? I can't say for sure. That may be how it originated. I don't know. But anyway, when you and I come to this psalm, it asks us a question. Who are you? Why are you here? And who do you think is fit in God's eyes? And it gives us a very simple answer.
And if you want to follow along, I've posted the psalm in the chat. So anybody who's listening can follow along by opening that link. What's the answer?
The answer, again, says words of one syllable, 2 syllables, and words of easy Hebrew. Words that you, even though they're written 2,500 years ago, anybody who ever went to Cheder knows these words. Holech Tamim Upoel Tzedek. You want to know who's fit to come in here? Whoever walks uprightly and whoever does justice. That's it. I know when I had to choose a wording for my father's tombstone, I used the words Poel Tzedek for two reasons: because he walked uprightly, did justice, and because that was the name of the shul that he went to all the time, the Poel Tzedek shul. Anyway, that's the first answer. Who does God care about? A person who does work, lives uprightly, a person who does justice. V'dover emet bilvavo, and who tells the truth in his heart. Anybody can daven and say the words. The test is, do you mean what you say? Do you tell the truth inside? What counts the most is not how many words you say, but do you mean what you say? Do you know what the word sincere means? Sincere is made up of two Latin words that mean without wax. And the reason for that is ancient statue makers used material, and it was hard to get perfect material. So they would end up with statues that had some holes in them. And the statue maker would take wax and fill in those holes. And he would usually fill in the outside holes. Why should he bother filling in the inside holes? Nobody's going to see them. And he would sign his work sine care, without wax, meaning it's honestly done. No hole, no wax covering up any holes, without wax. And the test of a good human being is if you're the same on the inside and the outside. If you're not like that artist who covered the holes on the outside but left the holes on the inside, but you're the same kind of person inside and out. V'lo ragal alishono, who hasn't any slander on his tongue. I got to tell you, I don't think I've hit anybody with my fist once this year that I can remember. I don't think I've kicked anybody with my foot once this year. I don't think so. But I'm sure I've hurt a lot of people with my tongue. I've gossiped. I've slandered. On Yom Kippur, we say al chet over and over and over again for sins of speech. Because I don't know about you, but I commit more sins with my tongue than with my mouth. I gossip, I ridicule, I shame. I commit more sins with my tongue than I do with any other part of my body. So v'lo ragal alishono. Who does God respect? Somebody who has no slander on his tongue. V'lo asa l're'ehu ra, and who does no harm to his neighbor. It's easy to love mankind. Why not? To love your neighbor, the one who's next door, who music plays loud at night and who doesn't take care of it, that's hard to love. And yet, the psalmist says, who has done no harm to his neighbor. A couple of 100 years after him, a good number of years after him, Hillel expressed the golden rule the same way that the psalmist does, negatively, by saying, what does it mean to love God? It means not to do to your neighbor what you wouldn't want your neighbor to do to you. But it doesn't really matter, positive, negative. The idea is who doesn't harm his neighbor. V'cherpa lo nasa al krovo, and who takes up no reproach, who doesn't make accusations, who doesn't make blame, who doesn't insult his krovo. Karov means the one who's closest to him. And in modern Hebrew, karov is a relative. So what it means, I think, is who treats other people as if they were his relatives, as if they were his own flesh and blood, and who doesn't hurt them, and who doesn't ridicule them. Is there a line so far where the Hebrew isn't absolutely simple? And is there a line so far in which the answer doesn't fit. If the shoe fits, take it off. But isn't this really what we do? V'nivzeh be'einav nimas v'tirei Adonai yechabed. He doesn't hang out, he doesn't associate with people who are abominable. And instead, he hangs out, he associates, he honors those that revere the Lord. For a very simple reason. The people that you hang out with determine the kind of person you are. You hang out with bad people, you're not going to be good. What's the matter with you? You silly, you're sissy. If you hang out with good people, they'll influence you and they'll create an environment in which it's easier to be good. And therefore, he says, the truly religious person is somebody who honors those that fear the Lord. Whether they're rich or whether they're poor, whether they're young or whether they're old, whether they're handsome, whether they're not, doesn't matter. He honors those that revere the Lord, and he doesn't hang out with people who are disgusting. Nishba lehara velo yamir, who swears to his own hurt and doesn't change, who keeps his word. When he says something, he means it. When he says something, he does it. And if it ends up being to his own damage, no. So it ends up being to his own damage. He keeps his word. This is what it means to be religious, period. Not to make big speeches and promises to God. It means to, when you say something, you stand behind what you say. Kaspo Lonatan Beneshech, who doesn't give his money out, it's mistranslated here, not on interest, on usury. You're allowed to give your money out on interest. You're not allowed to charge usurious rates. You know, the word neshech comes from the same root as the word bite. You're not allowed to bite. Person needs money, you're going to take a bite out of him? You're going to charge a fortune? That's not right. My friend Harold Kushner, Zichrono V'Rocha, had a wonderful comment on this line. He says, how many people in this room are mafia, what's the word, mafia, help me, mafia gang lords who charge usurious interest? How many people in this room are even bankers? Why do we have to say on Yom Kippur, forgive me, God, for charging high interest? Do you charge? I don't charge high interest. I don't loan anybody. Nobody ever asks me for money. What is the way to say that? And Harold Kushner says it refers to that parent who takes care of his child from the moment of birth, who feeds the child, who nurses the child, who stays up all night when the child is sick, who worries about the child every day and every night. And then when the child grows up, the child goes in a different way than the father would like or the mother would like. And what does the parent say to the child? After all I did for you, you owe me. How could you go and do the opposite of what I believe in? That's not right. You owe me. And Rabbi Kushner says that's charging interest. Because this child didn't ask to be born. And this child has the right to go his own way. And if you want to persuade him with logic and persuade him by example. Don't try to persuade him by saying, you owe me. Because if you say that, he'll never listen to you. That's charging high interest. Do you like that explanation? I think it's a very good one. V'shochad al naki lo lakach, and he never takes a bribe to find against innocent men. You know, bribes have a subtle effect. Even if you don't mean to, once you take a bribe, you're influenced. That's why the rabbis bent over backwards to be impartial and never take a bribe. In Jewish law, there was a court. The youngest people in the court spoke first. Because if the older ones spoke, the younger ones might be intimidated and afraid to disagree with their elders. So they spoke first. So because that's a kind of shachar. That's a good answer you gave. You agree with me. That's a kind of bribery. And we have to avoid bribery. There are all kinds of bribery. All kinds of bribery. Somebody says to you, boy, you're really smart. And then he comes up and trial before me. I'm not going to find for him. He likes me. He thinks I'm wonderful. I'm going to find for him. Subtly, or consciously, unconsciously, we can do that. And then he finishes the psalm with the simple words, Ose ele lo yimot la'olam. A person who lives like this, who does these deeds and does not do these sins, will stand firm, will never be shaken. God will respect and revere and love this kind of person. It's the shortest, simplest definition of love, of religion that I know. The shortest, simplest definition of religion I know is to do these things, to walk upright, tell the truth, to keep your word. What else is there? Have I left anything out? I don't think so. These are the words that make sense and that tell us what it means to be religious. And they read just as appropriately to us right now. You said, is this my favorite song? These words sound like they were written for today. And they're just as true today as they were 2,000 years ago. So that, I think, is my favorite song. Should I tell you one more?
Yes, please.
And I have mixed feelings about this one. I'm not sure. I don't know whether it's right or wrong. Stein Paul Heilson tells a story. People are, 2 months ago, everybody in Israel was on the edge of a civil war. There was fighting, there was disagreement everywhere. Then came this terrible, terrible, terrible attack. And overnight, the people of Israel united and became one people. And Gaza is not very far away. The whole country became a land of Jewish mothers. People got into their cars. People made food. They made challah, they made rolls, they made desserts, they made all kinds of things. And they drove them to Gaza and gave them to the soldiers as a gift, as a sign that we're with you, we care about you. And they wrote in them a small note, may you come home safe. And the whole country did that. It was a land of Jewish mothers. And the ultra-Orthodox did the same thing. Until now, the ultra-Orthodox stayed out of things. They weren't part of the country's culture. But when they saw Jewish boys in trouble, they ran to help them. And one of the things they brought them was Sifrei Torah, so that they could study Torah, read the Torah. That's what they did. And Paul Heilson tells the story that by the way, you can Google him, you can find his letters under Sapir. One soldier, one group has a minyan in Gaza, and they open the Torah, and they don't have a yad. You know what a yad is? A yad is a pointer with which you don't touch the Torah with your hand, you touch it with a pointer, and that's how you go from word to word to word. And somehow, I don't know how it happened, this Torah arrived in Gaza without a pointer. The soldier hesitates for a minute, reaches into his pocket, and pulls out a penknife. And he uses the penknife as a pointer, and he reads the Torah that way. I don't know what you think about that story. It can be read two ways. It can be read, look what a wonderful thing he did. He combined physical military equipment with the Torah. Hooray for him. or it can be read, what a terrible thing he did. The instrument, a knife is an instrument of war. The Torah is an instrument of peace. How can you mix them together? The Talmud says that when they built the Mishkan, they didn't use any iron instruments because iron is an instrument of war and that the Mishkan is supposed to be a place of peace. How could they do that? How could they take your choice? I won't ask you to vote. Was the soldier right? Was the soldier wrong? You can make the case both ways. I don't know where I stand. I'm not sure. I think I probably tilt, and I'm not sure, toward the second explanation. To keep, what does it say? You shall beat your swords into plowshares. Sometimes you got to beat your plowshares into swords. Otherwise, you'll get killed. But if you do it, I think you should do it with hesitation, with regret, temporarily, and not make a habit of it. One of the great dangers of religion in Israel today are those people who have combined devotion to war with the Torah. It's a mitzvah to kill as many Arabs as you can. It's our land, not theirs, and so on. I don't think that's the Jewish view. I think the Jewish view is there's a place and a time to fight. Yeah. There's a place and a time to kill. Yeah. But the goal is not to kill, and the goal is not to fight. The goal is to live in peace. How do you do that? I don't know. I don't want to claim I'm smarter than I am. But at least the goal of the Torah is to live in peace. And we got to somehow figure out a way to do that. And putting a knife on the Torah is not quite the way. I'll tell you a terrible story that's found in the Midrash. It says that now we cast lots. We throw dice to decide who's going to go up the ramp and carry out the mitzvahs of the sacrifice that goes on there. Why do we do it by casting dice? Because originally it was a race. Whoever got there first did it. And there was one case where two men raced each other to carry out the sacrifice first, and the first one stabbed the second in order to get there first. And that's horrible enough. What happened next was even more horrible. The father of the dead soldier, the dead priest, ran up, pulled the knife out of his son, and said, "Oh, hooray, the knife is not tameh. The knife can still be used." What kind of insanity is that? Your kids died, and you're worried about the kashrut of a knife? That's when they decided from now on, we're not going to have any more races. We're going to do it by dice. We're going to do it by lot. And I share that story with you because I think it makes the point of the danger of religion then and now, at least as much now as then, that religion can become an excuse for war and a motivation for war and an excuse for atrocities. It can become an excuse for atrocities against the enemy. And that way doesn't lead to peace. You ask me what way leads to peace? I don't know. I'm not that smart. But I'm sure that committing atrocities doesn't lead to peace. I have a hunch that every time they kill somebody in Gaza, the bereaved family would become Hamas supporters. I don't know. But I think that this psalm, written 2,000 years ago, speaks to us today with its warning that you have to be careful, double careful in time of war, not to let the sword rule over the Torah, but to make sure that the Torah rules over the sword. I hope that makes sense. If you disagree or if you want to present another point of view or you want to ask a question, feel free to do so. If not, I'd like to make a plug, if I may. The book that Eli Spitz and I have written has just come out. And I would be thrilled and grateful if these stories have whetted your appetite, if you like them, that you buy the book and that you buy it from me. You can get it on Amazon.com, but if you buy it from me, I will autograph it for you, or if you're giving it as a gift to somebody else, I'll do it that way. But I would be grateful, really grateful, if you like what I said today and you want to hear more, that you buy the book. My address, listen carefully, write it down. My address is 22083, 22083, Cyprus, not Cyprus, Cyprus, Cipres, Way, not street, not road, not avenue, Way, Boca Raton, Florida, 33433. The book will cost $28.95, and I will pay for the postage to me and then to you. If you send me your address, or if your address is on the check, and make the check out to me, Jack Riemer, Riemer. You can wait if you want to a couple years for the hardback. When my first book came out, it came back in hardback and in paperback. And I told people, if you buy it in paperback, I'll sign it sincerely yours. And if you buy it in hardback, I'll sign it passionately yours. And if you buy both, I'll give you a free copy of The Sensuous Woman by Jay, which I wish I had written. This time it's only in paperback, at least for a while. And I hope you'll buy it. And I hope you have the address. And I hope that you'll
Can we just correct the address? We just want to make sure we definitely have the right one, because the one we had was 20833. That sounds like that is incorrect. Could you 20833?
I think that's the right address. I'm sorry. My mistake.
20833.
Thank you. My mistake. I apologize. Yeah. Yeah. It's like you remember everybody else's phone number except your own.
Except your own, yes.
Right.
We ask bar and bat mitzvah kids each week for their cell phone numbers, and almost none of them know it.
Right.
So, so
20833.
20833.
Cyprus Way, Boca Raton. Anybody have any questions or comments that they'd like to make?
We'll take one last question if somebody would like to ask a final question. Any hands?
Did you find this of interest? Yes, I hope you did.
Very much so. I see a lot of nodding screens, a lot of thumbs ups. Rabbi, we are so deeply grateful to you for this tour de force of the Psalms, and also such incredibly powerful modern meanings that really speak exactly to our moment today. And I want to say I am in awe of you as you are coming to your 95th birthday. Our birthday wish for you is that you should retain the strength and the vigor and the brilliance that you shared with us this morning. It should get stronger and stronger with each passing day.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can I make one more plug? Is there anybody here who was not in shul this last Shabbos? If so, you missed a fantastic sermon. I mean it, by Rabbi Robinson. One of the best sermons I've ever heard.
Oh,
Not
Rabbi, thank you.
And I would urge you to run, not walk, to the Temple Emanuel website and look up sermon something.
The sermons that are there.
Sermons that are there, and go to Rabbi Robinson
Oh.
and listen or read the sermon she gave this last Shabbos, because it's a fantastic sermon.
Oh, thank you, Rabbi Riemer. Well, I have learned from you. So thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you for all of the gifts that you have given me and all the gifts you give us. And we are so blessed to learn from you. Everybody, go out and buy this book. Write a check. I know it's old fashioned. Write a check, send it, and go purchase this book. Duets and you will not regret it. The stories that were shared this morning are magnified within the book, and it was a joy and a pleasure and a true honor to learn from you this morning, Rabbi. You can all unmute and share your thank yous if you would like. Sean will stop recording.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.